The road in Cambodia led to Phnom Penh. The fighting raged closer and closer to the capital. Ed Bradley was among the reporters covering the last days of Cambodia.
Death came when they least expected it. Two soldiers took a break by the side of a road, far enough behind the so-called front lines that, for the moment, they felt secure. But at that same moment, a Khmer Rouge gunner changed the coordinates on his captured American-made 105 artillery piece. One shell, two dead, their bodies ripped apart by the blast. Morm VIυπάρχwas luckier. He narrowly escaped death, but never before had the war and the killing left him so dazed. He was walking through the field with his sergeant. They were born within a year of each other and grew up in the same village. From childhood, they were best friends, and since the start of this war had served in the same unit. The sergeant was looking for a place to relieve himself when he stepped on a mine. VIυπάρχ, who was walking next to him, caught shrapnel under both eyes. He picked up the body of his friend and placed it in a bunker. His leg had been blown away, and there seemed to be no life left in his body. VIυπάρχwalked out looking for help. More than 3 hours later, Chun Ben is carried out, still alive. All of this takes place just 10 miles from Phnom Penh. Yet there were no helicopters to evacuate his friend, no blood to give him a transfusion, no morphine to deaden the excruciating pain, no medicine to prevent shock, not even a roll of gauze to bind the stump that is left of his leg. More than 3 hours after he stepped on a mine, Chun Ben is still alive. He's taken to the command post where his papers are kept. And as a crowd gathers at the open window, he still receives no medication, no blood transfusion. His leg is wrapped in gauze as life continues to ebb. 4 hours after he stepped on that mine, Chun Ben is back in the ambulance, now racing towards Phnom Penh and the 401 hospital. There is still life left in his body, but a good deal of his blood has spilled to the ground. Morm VIυπάρχcouldn't come to the hospital with his friend. His wounds were considered light, so they were cleaned in the field, and he was sent back to his unit. So he wasn't here when his best friend finally received medication and a blood transfusion. And he wasn't here to see his friend's body fight against the pain. And he wasn't here to see Chun Ben die.
Americans were leaving Cambodia now, contractors, relief workers, much of the U.S. Embassy payroll, getting out while they still could. On April 12th, the last Americans left Phnom Penh. Again, a report from Ed Bradley.
The American embassy was tense. Marine guards in civilian clothes, armed with M16s, stood behind a closed and locked gate. The rumors and speculation of the last several days had become fact. The Americans were leaving. The decision had been made to evacuate the American embassy and all its personnel, including a number of Cambodians and their families who had worked for the embassy, as well as some high Cambodian officials. Flatbed trucks were loaded behind the embassy as a few remaining American officials secured the area prior to their own departure. The trucks were then taken to an area that had been secured by some 350 U.S. Marines flown in from the Okinawa and Hancock, cruising on station in the Gulf of Thailand. The evacuation of Phnom Penh was carried off with the memory of recent evacuations in Vietnam. There was an overpowering fear among American officials, both in Phnom Penh and in Washington, that this evacuation would cause panic in the streets and possibly a rash of anti-American sentiment. With that in mind, the Marines established a perimeter around the landing zone. But there was no real need for soldiers or weapons, as the only crowds that gathered were, for the most part, smiling and waving children drawn by curiosity. The CH-53 helicopters lifted off from Phnom Penh, headed for the Gulf of Thailand, ending still another phase in the American involvement in Indochina. In a matter of hours, it was all over. The American presence in Cambodia ended with the liftoff of Ambassador Dean and his party. But the official announcement, heard aboard ship, provided the period to the ending. There were the familiar notes of the boatswain's pipes, and then these words, announcing the arrival on board of the American Embassy, Phnom Penh. Ed Bradley, CBS News, aboard the USS Okinawa.